Pokemon has always been a series of games rife with opportunity for challenge runs. The popularity of Nuzlocke, Iron Man runs, and so many more proves that people love pushing the challenge of Pokemon battling as far as they can. So it's no surprise that a new contender has appeared to win the hearts of Pokemon battle fanatics across the world. I'm talking, of course, about Pokerogue. Pokerogue, for anyone who hasn't heard of it yet, is a Pokemon roguelike. This isn't a new concept. Projects like Pokemon Emerald Rogue have experimented with a roguelike spin on the Pokemon franchise before, but Pokerogue is an experience which refines its core gameplay to Pokemon battling and battling alone. No fluff, no nonsense. That's not to suggest that the experience is simplistic, however. An array of new items with unique buffs and effects, access to Dynamax and Mega Evolution, and a wide range of unique moves for Pokemon to use makes Pokerogue a whole lot of fun. It's no surprise that myself and so many others have been absorbed by its gameplay. And after I'd put in well over 50 hours just exploring all the different directions my runs could go, I knew I wanted to take on a challenge like no other. Pokerogue, like most roguelikes, is very challenging when you start out. A new player has access to starter Pokemon from generations 1 to 9, and can spend points up to 10 to add Pokemon to their starting team. Any Pokemon you catch will be added to your roster of starter Pokemon, which can be brought into future runs. Additionally, certain achievements or accomplishments in Classic mode will grant egg vouchers, which can be spent on a gacha machine for a chance of common, rare, epic, or legendary eggs. Eggs hatch into Pokemon, which will then be added to your starter pool, but they can also grant egg moves, often moves which that Pokemon doesn't have access to in the original games. While these are being updated pretty regularly at the moment, while the developers still find a balance, some of these can get pretty wild. Bitter Malice Fennekin, Power Up Punch Torchic. There are even some Pokemon with inaccessible moves, such as Iron Valiant with Magical Talk, or Squirtle with Bouncy Bubble. For a while there was even Bidoof with Surging Strikes, but that one has since been changed. Never forget what they took from you. But as you progress in Pokerogue, the difficulty of Classic mode becomes less of a challenge. Access to Legendary and Paradox Pokemon, especially with such powerful moves, means that some runs can be blown wide open pretty quickly. And while they were still fun, I was looking for more of a challenge. So I embarked on the journey to beat Pokerogue with only one Pokemon. As always, let's lay down some ground rules. Rule number 1, I can only start with one Pokemon. And number 2, you'll never see this coming, no catching additional Pokemon for my team. This means no pickup Pokemon, no extra Pokemon for double battles, and so on. Third, no Pokemon with a point cost of 6 or higher. Put simply, this means no Paradox Pokemon, no Legendaries, no Mythicals, no Ultra Beasts. Many of these Pokemon are standard for clearing Classic and Endless mode as the primary or sole carry, so I wanted to limit my pool of available Pokemon. And last but not least, no save scumming. Pokerogue is actually a browser game, which saves your run after every battle. This means that refreshing the webpage during a battle will restart the current battle from the beginning, allowing a player to scout an opponent or even bypass failure. With the rules of the challenge established, I faced an important decision. Which Pokemon would I ultimately choose to embark on this challenge with? This was a tough decision. In fact, prior to establishing the rules of the challenge, I attempted some solo runs with famously weak Pokemon, such as Bidoof or Hoppip, only to struggle to even get past the first few stages. Needless to say, many of the available starters would simply not be possible. If not for the challenges faced at the start of the run, then no doubt by the threats that lie in wait at the end. I would need to find a Pokemon with a good defensive typing, able to check many of the static Pokemon that would appear throughout the run, and access to strong moves to sweep through any other threats I might encounter. Those who have played, or perhaps even cleared Classic mode of Pokerogue will know exactly what threats I'm referring to. But for those who aren't in the know, the main types I was looking for included Ice, Steel, Psychic, and Fairy. Among my first ideas, one thought I had was Squirtle. My Squirtle had access to some fantastic egg moves in Bouncy Bubble, a Water-type special move which heals the user and deals damage, as well as Ice Beam. Blastoise has access to both a Gigantamax form and a Mega Evolution as well. But ultimately, I opted against Squirtle as the best setup move it would have access to would be Shell Smash, which would lower my own defenses. It failed to check some threats I was worried about in the endgame, and although Blastoise had access to powerful forms, there wasn't any guarantee that I would find the necessary items, namely a Mega Bracelet or Dynamax Band. Another appealing choice was Mawile. Steel Fairy is one of the best defensive typings in the game, and an absolutely stellar choice against some of the late game threats. Not only that, Mega Mawile's incredible stats and ability would mean that finding a Mega Stone would give me a real fighting chance. Though again, I opted against Mawile, this time because I was lacking any good egg moves to really solidify a build. But as I scrolled further down the list of generations, wondering where I might find that perfect starter Pokemon, It was in the list of Generation 9 that I found my answer, Tinkatink. Like Mawile, Tinkatink is a Fairy Steel type, making it capable of answering threats in the late game. I had the egg move Shift Gear unlocked, which gives +1 attack and +2 speed, making it a fantastic setup move for speed control and sweeping. Tinkatink also had access to its hidden ability, Pickpocket, as well as a fantastic passive ability. Passive abilities are abilities which can be unlocked in addition to a Pokemon's standard ability. In Tinkatink's case, this is huge power, an absolutely game-changing ability. At least it would have been if I actually had this unlocked. But as a silver lining, I happen to have a shiny Tinkatink as well. Shiny Pokemon in Pokerogue improve the odds of items improving in rarity, so this was a point in its favour as well. So, with my partner Pokemon chosen and my preparations finalised, I embarked on the journey to clear the 200 floors of grueling battles that awaited me in Pokerogue's Classic mode. Starting things off, let's talk about items. After each battle, you'll be offered a selection of items. These can be consumable items like potions and ethers, hold items such as berries, or more rare and exclusive items like vitamins, TMs, and so on. For now, let's quickly cover some of the main things I'll be looking for throughout the run. First up is the map. Of the 5 item tiers of Common, Great, Ultra, Rogue, and Master, the map isn't too rare, as it's only a Great tier item. What it does is it allows me to choose which biome I travel to at a crossroads, which will be essential as a poorly timed visit to a biome with fire or ground type Pokemon could spell defeat. Rogue tier items are also very powerful. These can include items like the Berry Pouch, which gives a chance to save berries after they're used, the Soldew, which boosts the effect of natures, the Shell Bell and Leftovers, which grant in-combat healing, and the Wide Lens, which improves accuracy of moves by 5 for each stack. There are a few others in this tier, like the Grip Claw, Focus Band, and King's Rock, but the aforementioned are the items I'm really on the lookout for. Lastly are the Master tier items. While I don't expect to find many of these throughout the run, if any, the big ticket item here is the Multi-Lens, which makes attacks hit 1 additional time per stack. For the most part, the things I'll be picking up from reward screens will be berries, X items, and vitamins. But of course this requires actually clearing battles, which Tinkatink doesn't have the easiest time with starting off. Many attempts struggled to get past the first couple of stages, as although Steel typing kept me extra safe, my only offensive moves starting out were Astonish and Fairy Wind, but Metal Claw at level 8 would make this a bit easier. Fortunately, I didn't need to wait that long to get some new moves. I found a TM for Draining Kiss at floor 2. Tinkatink normally learns this at level 17, but this early on it was a good upgrade over Fairy Wind, which allowed me to heal in combat, a huge boost to my early survivability. Then at floor 4, we had a huge pickup, a Berry Pouch. Berries, as you'll come to see soon enough, are very important in a solo challenge, often being the only way I can boost certain stats or heal large amounts of damage in combat. So getting a Berry Pouch to preserve some of my berries usage this early was massive. The first trainer at floor 5 posed a little issue, but they did give another fantastic reward. A TM for Rock Slide. Double battles are particularly threatening when you've only got one Pokemon, but Rock Slide allows me to hit both combatants at once, which makes these much more manageable and helps me avoid unnecessary damage. As I approached floor 8, it was time to see what challenges would await throughout the run. This is where we meet our rival, Ivy. This battle against Ivy was where most of my attempts had been met with defeat. Ivy appears throughout the run, and while she's very friendly and chipper at the moment, that might not be the case as we get deeper into the challenge. At floor 8, Ivy's team has 2 Pokemon, a starter Pokemon and a regional bird. For this run to have a real shot, I was looking for one thing and one thing alone. No fire types and no ground types. Fire was obviously the big concern here, since I effectively had to dodge a 1 in 3 chance from any of the primary starter Pokemon. Ground types, on the other hand, are pretty much limited to just Mudkip and Turtwig. Fighting types would be a little scary as well, but only later on when Terastallization came into play and I lost the super effective advantage against Fighting type. I start the battle to see her starter, a Turtwig. Definitely not ideal, but as it's yet to pick up any ground moves, I take it down without much difficulty. The second Pokemon, the regional bird, was a Fletchling. A fire and a ground type in her team was a bit of a dagger, but fortunately Rock Slide meant that I had a great answer to this. Hopefully that would continue to be the case later in the run. While my first battle with Ivy went smoothly, it was clear I'd have to keep my guard up against her team later on. After the 10th floor, our Pokemon is fully healed and we change biomes, taking us to a new area with a new encounter table. Stage 2, as I'll call it, went by without too much of anything noteworthy, with one exception. On floor 15, I found the map. just in time as well, as the first crossroads would be at floor 20. I take down a trainer at floor 18 with little problem, and I approach the end of stage 2. Floor 20 is the first floor where I can find a gym leader. The first can be found at either floor 20 at a 50% chance, or failing that at floor 30, with subsequent gym leaders appearing every 30 floors after the last. I was hopeful for a floor 20 gym leader just so long as it wasn't Chili, the fire-type gym leader from Generation 5. Fortunately, greeting me at floor 20 was Scylla, the grass-type gym leader instead, who I swept aside after a few shift gears. After the battle, I met with a choice of which biome to go to next. Of the 3 options, I chose the grassy field. The main reason for this was to avoid any problematic matchups. The Metropolis can lead to biomes featuring ground types, whereas the lake is full of water types who resist my steel type attacks, and can lead to biomes such as the mountain or volcano. The grassy field keeps my encounter table limited to grass and poison types, who I have little trouble dealing with. In addition, the gym leaders you encounter are influenced by whatever biome you're in when they appear, so avoiding biomes that might have troublesome gym leaders to face was a priority as well. Floor 25 sees the return of Ivy, who has a team of 3 Pokemon this time around. Her Turtwig and Fletchling have evolved, and she's now added a Bouffalant to her team. While there was some fear of this new foe having fighting type moves, I'm able to take care of her team once again with little issue, albeit thanks to a few lucky flinches. After the battle, Tinkatink evolves into Tinkertuff, and this is a good time to bring up the level cap. Pokerogue has a level cap which changes every stage. Any experience gained on a Pokemon at the level cap is disregarded, but you can exceed the level cap using rare candies, which can be obtained from the item reward screen. Stage 4 takes me to the tall grass biome, where more powerful grass-type Pokemon start to appear. It's here that we also start to see some more frequent threats appear, such as Ninetales. Fortunately, the Rock Slide TM I picked up means that I have a way of dealing with these pesky fire types. I find my first Vitamin at floor 37 as well, an HP up. A Ninjask boss at floor 40 goes down without much problem, and I continue onwards to the forest. At floor 42, I finally learn Play Rough, my main fairy attack for the remainder of the run. Though with Play Rough and Rock Slide, I was flirting with 90% accuracy on 2 of my moves. While not a massive problem, I was desperately hoping to find a Wide Lens to help mitigate any poor luck I might encounter. But the excitement continued at floor 44, where my Pokemon finally evolved into Tinkaton. This comes with the added benefit of learning Gigaton Hammer, an insane 160 base power steel type move. The drawback is that if the last used move was Gigaton Hammer, the attack fails. This is where my limited moveset started to become an issue as well. Of my 4 existing moves, I had a physical fairy attack, a rock attack, which served as my answer to double battles, a special fairy attack which would heal me, and a setup move. Though it pained me to pass up on in-combat healing, Draining Kiss had to go to make room for Gigaton Hammer. I had a similar conundrum when I was offered Fake Out at floor 49, but ultimately with only 4 moves to choose from, I had to choose what's essential over what would be nice to have. Bugsy awaited me at floor 50. But as his lead was a Shuckle, there was little stopping me from setting up several shift gears and sweeping through his team with my brand new moves. At the crossroad that followed, I was offered the choice of the jungle or meadow. I opted for the meadow, partly because I feared the jungle might feature more fire and fighting types than the name would suggest, and also because the meadow features primarily grass and fairy types, both of which I have a good matchup against. By this point, I was starting to amass a respectable stash of items as well. This was partly because I took every opportunity to pick up berries and hold items from my reward screen, but also because of the ability Pickpocket. Pickpocket gives me one of my opponent's held items if they hit me with a contact move, primarily physical attacks. Taking items from opponents is a common strategy in Pokemon. I tried to take advantage of Pickpocket whenever possible, sometimes even stalling turns if it meant the difference between stealing a valuable item or not. Ivy was back at floor 55. Now with a fully evolved Torterra. This is where I feared this attempt might join the others in the graveyard of failures. But after my first shift gear, Torterra hit back with a measly Razor Leaf. It seemed Ivy's Torterra hadn't learned a ground type move yet, so I took full advantage of this and set up as many shift gears as I could get away with. This time Ivy had also added a Duraludon to her team, but I landed a Play Rough to take it out as well as the Bouffalant which followed, bringing the 3rd rival battle to an end. I feared this might be the last of the easier rival battles, but I claimed a protein as my reward nevertheless. The rest of stage 6 went by without issue, the reason being that stat boosts and effects persist between battles in Pokerogue. They only disappear if your Pokemon is recalled, such as before a trainer battle, or switched out. Stage 7 sees me returning to the Plains, the biome from stage 2. I was offered Rogue Balls at floor 63, but unfortunately these served little purpose to me. It's worth noting as well that you can re-roll item rewards. However, there's no guarantee that you'll get the same rarity of item unless you find what's called a lock capsule. And even then, re-rolling items is expensive when I have to rely on that money to buy healing items and ethers. I breezed through stage 7, though not before picking up a hard stone just before the boss, a type boosting hold item which strengthens my rock slide. Faced with the crossroads once again, I return to the tallgrass biome for the same reason as before. Stage 8 gives me ample opportunity to stock up on berries. The next big threat in the back of my mind lies at floor 95, so I seek out every upgrade I can find before then. Trainer battles are a pleasant sight, as trainer Pokemon are much more likely to be holding berries or useful items, and give much more experience as well. I battle Erica at floor 80 and yoink a few berries where possible. I also grab X items when there are no better alternatives, though the X accuracy in particular is one I grab at most opportunities. Floor 84 is where I find the most exciting reward since the early berry pouch, a Soul Dew. The Soul Dew in Pokerogue boosts the effect of natures by 10%. My Tinkaton is Impish, which boosts defense at the cost of special attack, making the Soul Dew a free defensive boost at no extra cost. I then could have had a Golden Egg, a rare experience boosting item, the following floor, if I'd actually noticed the Ninjask holding it. And we're not done there. Floor 86 gives me a Reviver Seed, an item I can only have one of, but will revive me for 50% of my HP upon fainting. And then floor 87 offers me a Grip Claw, another hold item which gives a 10% chance to steal enemy items. While not as consistent as something like Pickpocket or a Pokemon with Pickup, I gladly take it. After a quick trainer battle and a boss low kicks, we're on to stage 10. In these first 5 floors, my utmost priority is finding any extra held items, an X accuracy, and pushing my level as far as possible. Unfortunately, I don't find anything too remarkable. I grab a few berries and heal up before floor 95, the 4th rival battle with Ivy. At this point, it's clear to see that Ivy's string of losses is starting to get to her. Apparently she's given up sleep and food to train her Pokemon, and she doesn't know whether to love me or hate me. As worrying as this is, I'm more worried about what new Pokemon I might have to face. She sends out her Torterra once more, this time Terastallized, but I'm surprised when she switches it out for a Goldengo. Goldengo can be a tough nut to crack. Steel Ghost is a good typing that I don't have many answers to, and Make It Rain is a strong special move. Fortunately, I quickly noticed that Goldengo planned to spam Make It Rain much to its own detriment, debuffing its own special attack. I take as many hits as I can while setting up shift gears, before taking it down with Play Rough. I miss a Rock Slide against the Talonflame that follows, and for a moment I fear I've been complacent and thrown the run away. But I tank the Aerial Ace and sweep through the rest of her team. Her other new Pokemon was a Florges, which went down to a Gigaton Hammer, but now we were well and truly past the easier rival fights. It'll be 50 more floors until our next encounter with Ivy, and I've got a lot to prepare until then. I tackle the rest of stage 10 and head back to the meadow for stage 11. While we're here, let's quickly revisit that priority list as far as items go. For regular common items, I'm still grabbing rare candies, X accuracies, and berries as my top priority, particularly citrus and enigma berries. Citrus berries restore HP when I fall below half, whereas enigma berries restore HP if I'm hit by a super effective move, which would become incredibly important later on. Among rares, I nab vitamins and nuggets where possible, but it's among the higher tiers that my most wanted items are. These being type boosting items like the Metal Coat, Hardstone, and Fairy Feather in the Ultra tier, the Wide Lens, Leftovers, and Shell Bell in the Rogue tier, and the Multi Lens in the Master tier. Of these items, I'm still missing a Metal Coat, the Wide Lens, Leftovers, and the Shell Bell. And while I'm building up a stockpile of vitamins and berries, you can never truly have enough of these. At floor 110, I face off against Lenora, which goes about the same way most trainer battles tend to go. Lots of shift gear, and hoping that my sub 100 accuracy moves don't let me down. That brings us to stage 12, the beginning of my 3rd loop from the plains. The wild Pokemon here don't pose much of a threat to me anymore, so I quickly hurry onwards to stage 13. I managed to find a Zinc at floor 121, a welcome boost to Tinkaton's special defense. But at floor 123, an Ultra tier item upgrades not just to a Rogue tier, but a Master tier item, the Healing Charm. Of the Master items I could have received, this sits firmly in the middle. It's not useless to me like a Master Ball or Charm would have been, but it's not as game-breaking as something like the Multi-Lens. Nevertheless, bonus healing from my potions and berries is something I'll happily take. Stage 13 continues to deliver with another Soul Dew at floor 125, and I take down a scary Torterra at floor 130. Stage 14, the final stage before the next major threat, is back in the forest. I managed to pickpocket a Lucky Egg from a Low Kicks at floor 132, granting a nice boost to my experience gain. While not essential by any stretch, this means I can gain more levels before threatening mid-stage battles, like the rival and trainer battles. Floor 135 offers another rogue tier reward as well, though unfortunately this time it's the ability charm, which is effectively useless to me. At floor 140 I encounter Brassius, Generation 9's grass-type gym leader. He leads with an Amoonguss, but even in the sun there's little it can do to stop my setup. I yoink a few items in the process and run through his team with little trouble. Stage 15 is where my real next challenge awaits. If there's any point in the run before the final stage where I'll meet my end, it's a toss-up between this and stage 19. To prepare for the rival battle, I look for more berries and X items, but at floor 142 I find a game changer, a second berry pouch. Many hold items in Poké Rogue can be stacked multiple times. In the case of the berry pouch, this means I now have a 50% chance to keep any berries I use, instead of 25%. This is a huge upgrade for longer battles, during which I may have to rely on berries to keep me healthy, so I nab it without hesitation. I find Ivy at floor 145, who won't even utter a word to me. Ivy isn't playing around anymore. She has a full team of 6 Pokemon, including one particularly infamous threat, a shiny Rayquaza. This Pokemon is one of 3 battles in the run for which I knew I would need a fairy type. This Rayquaza will sweep through entire teams if you give it a chance. Fortunately, my battle with Ivy mirrored the previous one a lot. She switched her Torterra out for Gholdengo and spammed Make It Rain, giving me the opportunity to reach a fully boosted +6 attack and speed. A Talonflame, Torterra, and Bouffalon went down in single hits, and the dreaded Rayquaza itself stood little chance against the tiniest little titan that it's ever seen. It was a relief to get past this rival battle, not just because I'd managed to do so unscathed, but because now I knew what I would have to face later on. Ivy's full team was known to me now, and if her AI in this encounter had been anything to go by, it seemed she didn't have an answer for Tinkaton's impressive defensive typing. Nevertheless, I wasn't out of the woods yet. That would come at floor 150 when I went to the meadow. Yeah, that was bad, sorry. Stage 16 went by without anything of note, as most wild Pokemon went down to a single hit at this point. I was able to PP max all of my moves by floor 156, though at this point PP wasn't as much of an issue due to leper berries and the berry pouches. I also nab a Carbos at floor 158, and floor 159 even offers me 2 rogue tier items. These are a Mega Bracelet, which I have no use for, and an Experience Charm, which doesn't benefit me once I hit the level cap. For stage 17, I went to the Fairy Cave. While this was a diversion from my previous route, I was feeling confident about my strength, and wanted to ensure I had an easier matchup for the gym leader that awaited me at floor 170. At floor 163, I received my second Master Tier item of the run, an Egg Voucher Plus. I'm starting to realize that the Healing Charm was a better pickup than I gave it credit for. In fact, by this point, my items were in pretty good shape. I've got quite a few useful vitamins, plenty of Lum and Leper berries, a couple type boosting items, and a Reviver Seed as a last resort. But what I'm really after are more citrus and enigma berries, so I made finding more of these a priority as I proceed to floor 170, where the gym leader Valerie awaited me. She brings out her own Steel Fairy type in an effort to stop my setup, but I shrug off Marwile's attacks and steal some berries as I set up. Though I'm still finding frustrations with the accuracy of some of my moves, I managed to beat Valerie without too much issue. The Crossroads offered me the Ice Cave and the Stratosphere biomes next. The correct choice was Ice Cave, no doubt, which is why I absent-mindedly went to the Stratosphere. It's worth noting at this point that I wasn't looking up encounter tables, but where I presumed I would be met with more fairies, I primarily found Steel and Psychic type Pokemon. Fortunately, Shift Gear was still putting in a lot of work, and outside of a Claydol lowering my accuracy and burning through some Enigma berries, I didn't encounter too many problems. You might remember that I said stage 19 was another big hurdle in the run. The reason being that this is the penultimate area in the game, and the area in which you fight the Elite Four and Champion. These 5 trainers are based off of the main games, and you can encounter any region's roster. Of the options, the Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn Elite Four were those I had the best matchups against. The only major threats among them were Bruno, who I had a super effective attack against, and perhaps Steven, due to the possibility of seeing threats like Metagross or a Hoenn Legendary. The Unova, Alolan, and Blueberry Academy Elite Four were hit or miss. Trainers like Grimsley and Olivia wouldn't be a threat, but others such as Marshall, Hala, and Crispin could be problematic if I didn't have time to set up. And the worst matchups I could face were among the Sinnoh, Kalos, and Paldean Elite Four. For Sinnoh, Flint and Bertha hit 2 of my major weaknesses, and I had no super effective moves for most of Aaron and Lucian's teams. Among the Kalos Elite Four were Malva and Vikstrom, who heavily threatened my team or would take a long time to punch through respectively. And while the Paldean Elite Four had Hassel, a Dragon-type trainer I could sweep through with ease, I'd first have to survive against Rika and Poppy. I arrived at floor 182 to find Aaron, indicating that unfortunately for me, it would be the Sinnoh Elite Four standing in my way. Thankfully, Aaron himself wasn't too threatening. His switch on the first turn gave me time to set up shift gears, and he had little to break through the defensive prowess of Steel Fairy. I swept through his team and claimed a Mega Bracelet as my reward, which I only grabbed this time in the hopes of removing it from the pool of available items. Next up was Bertha, the first of the two major threats among the Sinnoh Elite Four. She led with a Steelix who immediately used Dig. Knowing I couldn't risk taking too many super effective hits due to how precious my Enigma Berries were, I alternated between using Shift Gear and dealing damage to take Steelix down as soon as possible. Before I could take it out, Bertha swapped a Whiscash to take the blow, before sending in her Power Nod. One play rough sent it packing, but the Rhyperior that followed took 2 hits before going down. I finished off Steelix, and recognizing that I just ran out of Citrus Berries, I allowed her Gliscor to attack me so I could pickpocket another Enigma Berry without consequence. Her last Pokemon, a Crocodile, went down to a play rough, and I moved on after a fair bit of healing and PP recovery. Now it was time for Flint. While he's notorious in Sinnoh for having very few actual fire types on his team, that isn't the case here. He leads with a Darmanitan, which I feel too threatened by to risk setting up. I land a lucky flinch with Rock Slide and take it out in 2 hits. Flareon comes out next, and I recognize an opportunity to use Shift Gear, but a Fire Spin quickly dissuades me from getting greedy. I set up one final Shift Gear on the Rapidash that follows, before running through his remaining Pokemon with Play Rough and Gigaton Hammer, at the cost of a few berries. Last up was Lucian, who didn't fare as well against me as his peers. Lucian didn't have anything on his team to interfere with my setup, so I spammed Shift Gear until my stats were maxed out. A Gallade with a Reviver Seed almost caught me off guard, but fortunately my defenses were solid enough to take the hit, and I ran through the rest of his team, even finding the time to yoink a few extra berries from Weirdir. With the Elite Four taken care of, it was up to Cynthia to see if she could best my Tinkaton. I took advantage of her lead's poor matchup to set up a Shift Gear, allowing me to take down Lucario. My Lotec was up next, who I presumed I could freely set up against, but after a Hydro Pump did over half my health, I quickly took it down. Fortunately, Cynthia had nothing left that could outspeed or threaten Tinkaton. Her Giratina went down with ease, and while Garchomp had a Reviver Seed and landed a Bulldoze, it was only enough to burn through a couple of berries. With Cynthia's defeat, at last we've reached the end, the final stage, which the game thought was a fitting enough place to offer me a shiny charm. It was here that I started to use my rerolls. I'd amassed plenty of money by this point, and I needed to find as many upgrades in the next 5 floors as possible. I begrudgingly picked up a Dynamax Band in the hopes of thinning out the item pool a bit further, but as I reached floor 194, I still felt a little light on upgrades, though I was able to find a Soul Dew at the last moment. It was time for the final battle against Ivy. The dreaded floor 195. As always, she led with her Torterra, and as I pressed Shift Gear, I was relieved that she seemingly still had no ground-type moves. But this time, she switched to her Talonflame. I was reluctant to assume that Talonflame was also without a Fire-type move given this choice, so I took it down with a Rock Slide. Gholdengo came out, and I knew this was the best chance I was going to get. I used Shift Gear as many times as I could get away with. But this time I didn't have any Citrus Berries. Rather than let me KO it myself, Ivy's Gholdengo used Memento to harshly lower my attack. Torterra came out afterwards, and after surviving a Gigaton Hammer, used Bite to put me into red HP. Little did I know this was a blessing in disguise. I had a number of stat boosting berries which I'd amassed throughout the run, and now I was at low enough HP to benefit from them. Every single one of my stats went up, and even with a scary Play Rough miss against Bouffalant, Tinkaton was too strong to be stopped. It even worked out in my favour, as Pickpocket allowed me to steal a Citrus Berry, which wasn't even consumed after one use. Ivy's Florges went down to a Rock Slide, and the final threat, a Mega Rayquaza, went down to a single Play Rough. I'd beaten Ivy at her strongest, and at last only one final obstacle remained. But first, I had 5 more floors to gather as many upgrades as I could, and I was determined to make the most of them. After taking down a Walking Wake at floor 196, I finally found one of the items I'd been searching for the entire run, a Wide Lens. My 90 accuracy moves were now 95 accuracy. A 1 in 10 chance of missing was now a 1 in 20. And if that weren't enough, I even found an X accuracy at floor 198. I would have no fear of missing crucial attacks. I just had to hope that I was strong enough. My final item reward, as ironic as it was, offered me a Master Ball, with no more money left to roll and no other useful items. It was at floor 200 where I found Eternatus, the final boss of Pokerogue's Classic Mode, and it was with this opponent in mind that I'd prepared a Steel Fairy Pokemon. Eternatus has 2 damaging moves, the Dragon-type move Eterna Beam and Cross Poison, both of which Tinkaton is immune to. Eternatus couldn't so much as touch me. But as anyone who has cleared Classic Mode before knows, this doesn't mean the final boss is without challenge. I took the opportunity to set up a full +6 attack and speed, while Eternatus did the same with Cosmic Power and Dragon Dance, boosting its attack, speed, and defensive stats. After bringing Eternatus down to 1/4 HP, the true battle against Emax Eternatus begins. Unlike its previous form, Emax Eternatus is equipped with Flamethrower, meaning I'm no longer invulnerable. Furthermore, Emax Eternatus is equipped with a mini black hole, an item which absorbs my items one by one each turn. It was a battle of attrition, and I had to hope that Eternatus didn't steal my vital items before I could try and take it down. Eternatus attacked with Flamethrower, but my stash of Enigma Berries and the fact that Eternatus hadn't boosted its special attack meant that I could out-heal all of the damage I was taking. I alternated between Gigaton Hammer and Play Rough to deal as much damage as possible, all while hoping I didn't fall victim to an unlucky critical hit. Just before I could remove the final shield on its health bar, Eternatus absorbed my Wide Lens. I hoped that the X accuracy would be enough to avoid any misses, and prayed that Eternatus didn't use the other new move it had at its disposal, Recover. I only had so many berries, and with my items being absorbed, I didn't have the endurance to survive a prolonged fight. I attacked again, and Eternatus responded with Flamethrower, and with one final Gigaton Hammer, I took down Emax Eternatus, successfully clearing Classic Mode with just one Pokemon. No legendaries, no mythicals, no Ultra Beasts. Just one little Titan with a very big hammer. Ultimately, this run was made possible by a lot of good fortune. The 2 berry pouches, the healing charm, Ivy's team throughout the run, lots of things had to come together to make this possible. But there are also a lot of things that could have made the run easier had I found some healing hold items or maybe even a multi-lens. And that's before even considering the fact that I did this without unlocking Tinkaton's huge power passive ability. But that's the beauty of roguelikes. Every run can look so different from the last, and a solo challenge in particular can be defined by whatever rollercoaster ride RNG decides to send you on. Nevertheless, I'm stoked to have accomplished this challenge without relying on notoriously powerful Pokemon like Zacian or Mega Mawile. All that remained was to reflect and honour the fallen. I'll never forget you, Wide Lens. I may have only had you for 4 floors, and you were made obsolete by an X accuracy, but you made the ultimate sacrifice. And for that, I thank you. If you haven't already, check out PokeRogue yourself at pokerogue.net. I can assure you you'll have a great time with it. And if you enjoyed this challenge, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Feel free to check out my other videos as well, and let me know what kinds of challenges you'd like to see me tackle next.